You could argue this kind of digital detox would be beneficial. We'd take our eyes off our screens, then strike up real-life conversations with each other. We've discovered that our smartphones can actually make phone calls. We bring back fax machines. And start making notes by hand. Well, maybe not fax machines, and hey, we'd still have TV to entertain us. The world would not fall apart. In fact, with almost 4 billion people having no access to the internet worldwide, half of humanity wouldn't notice a difference in the short term. But not you, mighty internet user. You would notice right away. If the internet suddenly flatlined, social media users would start calling each other on the phone, overloading the working telecommunication systems. Unless cell phone towers and telephone lines were also shut down. Then you'd go back to writing letters and sending them via post. Forget about wireless file transfers with no Wi-Fi. You'd have to use a physical cable to connect to computers or a CD. Remember this? Now think about the economy with financial data generally stored on a server. Banking service largely depend on the internet. Each transfer would be impossible. Your credit card and debit card would become a useless piece of plastic. Sometimes ignorance is preferable to the detailed truth. Maybe, we only care about truth in so far as it empowers us. Knowing and thinking about all of the details of every orange tree would just be a psychological burden for the most of us. I'll take illusion over the reality. But can't help but ask, is it possible that the mind is actually accessing a deeper kind of truth? Maybe, the mind is separating the signal from the noise. But what constitutes signal versus noise? Our values. A farmer that values knowing all the details of an orange tree will view it differently than a regular person. Well, where do our values come from? Here's Nietzsche's view from beyond good and evil, behind all logic and its seeming sovereignty of movement. There too stand valuations, or, more clearly, physiological demands for the preservation of a certain type of life. For Nietzsche, our values come from our physiological demands, and what does our physiology demand? Power. It wants to survive and thrive. What does it mean to thrive? To imagine the world a certain way and to be able to make that illusion a reality. Someone could try to contest this idea by saying that they don't seek power or want to thrive, they won't eat or drink anything to prove this point. But they would still be seeking a kind of power. They imagine a world in which they prove the idea wrong and they seek to bring that world into fruition, even at their own expense. So then begs the question, what if we cover the entire desert with solar panels? How much energy would we actually be able to produce, and how would this change our planet? Let's take a deep dive. For starters, let's begin here. This is the Where's That solar power station in Morocco, the world's largest concentrated solar power plant currently in existence in a marvel of modern engineering. Once fully completed and operational, the plant will take up an area of 25 square kilometers and be capable of producing 582 megawatts of electricity. It will even be capable of storing solar energy in the form of superheated molten salt, which allows for further production of electricity even into the night. After investing more than $9 billion into their solar energy objective, Morocco aims to create 4 additional plants similar to this one in the Sahara that will collectively create more than 2,000 megawatts of electricity production, which will be enough to provide for roughly 38% of all of Morocco's annual electricity needs. This project will transform Morocco into the world's leading solar energy state, and as the only African country that currently has a power cable linked to Europe, much of this energy will be exported for profit to the countries of the European Union. But all of this energy is created from just 5 relatively small plants. An ant is pretty stupid. It doesn't have much of a brain, no will, no plan, and yet, many ants together are smart. An ant colony can construct complex structures. Some colonies keep farms of fungi, others take care of cattle. They can wage war or defend themselves. How is this possible? How can a bunch of stupid things do smart things together? This phenomenon is called emergence, and it's one of the most fascinating and mysterious features of our universe. In a nutshell, it describes small things forming bigger things that have different properties than the sum of their parts. Emergence is complexity arising from simplicity, and emergence is everywhere. Water has vastly different properties to the molecules that make it up. Like the concept of wetness. Take wet fabric, if you zoom in far enough, there is no wetness. There are just molecules sitting in the spaces between the atoms of the cloth. Wetness is an emerging property of water. Something new, only created by a lot of individual interactions between water molecules. And this is sort of it. Many things interact under a certain set of rules, creating something above and beyond themselves. But for these things that we actually do really care about and do experience profound regret around, what does that experience feel like? We all know the short answer. It feels terrible. Regret feels awful. But it turns out that regret feels awful in 4 very specific and consistent ways. So, the first consistent component of regret is basically denial. When I went home that night after getting my tattoo, I basically stayed up all night. And for the first several hours, there was exactly one thought in my head. And the thought was, make it go away. This is an unbelievably primitive emotional response. It's right up there with, I want my mommy. We're not trying to solve the problem. We're not trying to understand how the problem came about. We just want it to vanish. The second characteristic component of regret is a sense of bewilderment. So, the other thing thought about there in my bedroom that night was, how could I have done that? What was thinking? This real sense of alienation from the part of us that made a decision we regret. We can't identify with that part. We don't understand that part. And we certainly don't have any empathy for that part, which explains the third consistent component of regret, which is an intense desire to punish ourselves. That's why, in the face of our regret, the thing we consistently say is, I could have kicked myself. The fourth component here is that regret is what psychologists call perseverative. To perseverate means to focus obsessively and repeatedly on the exact same thing. Now the effect of perseveration is to basically take these first 3 components of regret and put them on an infinite loop. So, it's not that I sat there in my bedroom that night, thinking, make it go away. It's that I sat there and I thought, make it go away. Make it go away. Make it go away. Make it go away. So, if you look at the psychological literature, these are the 4 consistent defining components of regret.